New iPads, Apple versus the UK, and an iCloud lawsuit dismissed. This is MacVoices. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter that keeps you up with everything MacVoices is doing. From our published episodes to Chuck's other appearances to special events and more, subscribe at macvoices.com/newsletter and stay fully informed so you don't miss a thing. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's Tuesday night. It's MacVoices Live. You could be with us on YouTube at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV. We've got quite a nice little crowd here to start the show tonight, and you could be just one more person in there throwing your comments or thoughts in. So please mark your calendars if you're listening to this after the fact and join us. And if you're listening during the fact, put it on the calendar anyway so that you don't miss it next week. We've got a lot to go through. We had a lot before today happened, and then today happened when we have even more stuff to go through. So we're just going to head right in and welcome David Ginsburg in the top left of my screen. David, good to have you.
Good to be here. And yes, there is a lot to talk about. Apple is just going crazy these last couple of weeks, but that means we can have some more fun talking about it.
Yeah, Apple and the whole tech world, really. The way
and tech too, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Marty Jencius is here. He said this is the highlight of his day, which I'm sure. Sorry about that, Marty.
Well, you know, Chuck, are you in a situation where you're called back to work? I mean, you know, that's the end thing now that everybody has to come into the job, or do you have some kind of ability to work wherever you want to work?
I'm actually full-time remote now. So the office I was working, the office I was working out of is gone. So yeah, I'm full-time remote.
Well, they haven't done that yet at the university, requiring us to come in. So I decided to sleep in from home instead of going to the university and sleeping there. So it was a good day.
Yeah, I like the way you roll, Marty. I like the way you roll. Speaking of rolling, Jeff Gamet is here. Jeff, how are you?
I am doing fine. And much like Marty, I am happy to be here. This is a high point for me every single week.
Well, I'm glad because it sure is for me as well.
Yep.
Last but not least, and definitely not a low point, Mr. Jim Rea. Jim, how are you?
Unfortunately, I had to return to the office. But the good news is the office is in my house.
I was going to say.
Okay, so we have multiple approaches to this whole return to work thing.
I guess I'm the only one that goes to the office every day.
Everybody pull out a violin for Dave.
Yeah.
Well,
I do
are you
feel
a federal employee?
Not for long.
Well, yeah, if he were, we'd all be helping him on that resume right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. ChatGPT, where are you?
Yeah.
Well, let's get to it. There, again, a lot of things to get to, but the first one I'll start with is Apple has a new iPad Air. And this is just one article. I've read a bunch of them. There seem to be mixed reactions to this as far as whether it measures up as to what it should be as a low-end iPad. The same actually is true for the other iPad that was announced today, and I got to find my note on that one.
Yep.
But we have two new iPads. Things are not working here. An 11th gen iPad with an A16 chip, and I'll put those in the chat room as well. I lost one of the chat rooms, and also a new keyboard for the Air, I believe it is. So those were the three product announcements. Now we're going to stay away from the rumors about what may or may not be coming later this week because they're just rumors at the moment, but these are definitely announced. So, how do you all feel about these? Are they decent upgrades? There was a discussion of the one not having the capability of running Apple Intelligence.
Right.
Which
I'm going to take my nap now. Let me know when we get to the next topic.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, well, we know how Jim feels about these.
Yeah.
Dave,
where do
you stand with these?
I mean, the Air, again, I just absorbed some of the information, just like you, being busy at work today, but got to look at the tail end of it. But I think just with the Air, I think you got the M3 chip that's adding some performance to it, but I don't know if it's drastic. I think the biggest key that came out of this is now that we can say goodbye to 64 gigabytes of storage. Thank God, finally. Because especially these iPads that had it was crazy. So the 128 is going to be the base. So I think overall, it's still a bargain, I think, with the cost. I mean, you're starting at $599 for a device that's running an M3 chip. Yeah, that's probably that's the price of a Mac Mini, but this is an iPad, and Apple's staying aggressive. I mean, we had that whole year that they came out with no models at all. Now we've got hit with 4 models within the last 6 months. So Apple's all in with iPads, and I think it's something to look forward to. I mean, I think this iPad 11th gen is going to be popular among all the people who just want a simple entry level model. You've got some improvements because I mean, I've used the 10th gen and the 9th gen. Yeah, those are they're pretty slow devices, well, at least for our standards. But for just a general user who wants an iPad, I think this is going to be an amazing upgrade with the A16 processor. And 128 base to start. So $349 base price like they've had in the past. So 2 good iPads. I don't know how overly exciting it is between the three of them, between the 2 models, but I like to hear what the other panel members think.
Well, first, I want to point out that I think it's incredibly funny that all the pundits were saying, oh, well, Tim Cook's little message on social media about there's something in the air means that we're getting a MacBook Air today.
Right.
And we did not.
Right.
So I'm clearly a horrible person because I find that incredibly funny and it warms my heart that all these pundits are wrong. Okay, so
Jeff,
the other standout.
I wonder how your comment just there will age.
It is accurate for today, and I'll take it as I can get it. I mean, we might get a MacBook Air later this week, but
maybe tomorrow.
Or maybe even, well, that's still later this week. But for today, I can gloat.
That seems pretty premature to me. I mean, and that's the thing they've been doing lately is having these batches of day.
It's true, but it's not premature for me to gloat for one day. I mean, look at the state of the world, Jim. Don't take this one little moment from me, please. Tomorrow's another day. I'll have to find something else to cling to. So,
and what did these pundits do to you? Don't
nothing. I'm just angry at the world. So I think Dave nailed it with this, with his take on this. I am a little surprised that the base model iPad is excluded from Apple Intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, that does seem a little weird. And if it's just to hit a price point, all right, well, it must make sense on that number spreadsheet. If it's to be a differentiator, wow, that's kind of a weird place to make the differentiation, on a core feature that Apple is pushing really hard across all its devices.
Jeff, though, I've been waiting for somebody to say that. And if that's the case, how many times have we said that the base model for so many different Mac models is really there just to be a base model, to sort of push you up into the middle ground?
Yeah.
And so, I looked at this. I tried to figure out a compelling reason or a use case or an audience that you would not want to give Apple Intelligence to.
Oh, how about education?
Well, that was the first thing I thought about. And it's like, okay, I'm not sure that's the case because gee, do I really not want to give kids access to these tools that they're going to be using for the rest of their lives? So I think there's a discussion point there, but I do agree with you that education would seem to be sort of the logical place.
It's like me working in enterprise, and AI in general is restricted, obviously. And it doesn't change at all with Apple. With the Apple Intelligence, they're going to restrict it somehow because it can go out and you can put company private information out in that AI world. So looking at it on that side, but for kids, I don't see why. Even if you go to kids going into grammar school, K-5, and then you got junior high and middle school, those kids you want them to be able to explore. There's nothing that the tool is to learn. But looking at the iPad, the 11th gen, interestingly enough, I wanted to just compare it to what processor is in the iPhone 16e. I mean, it's got the A18 chip in it, whereas that has Apple Intelligence. Well, Apple, interestingly enough, put the A16 in. So that kind of tells me, is the A16 capable of doing Apple Intelligence? I wonder. It probably isn't.
Well, the educational decision around AI is still, people are still arguing about that in education. Okay. Whether it's a tool that we should be teaching kids to use for the future, or are we going to try and put a fence around it so we can use the educational process that we've been doing for decades and not change our teaching to move with the technology and change our use to move with the technology, but instead to kind of keep us locked in the 50s and the 60s. The sad day in the Jencius household, no new product to buy out of this. I was a little surprised that the focus, at least on this device, was the A3 or the M3.
M3, right.
M3. Because, the reports on that is it's kind of a pain in the butt to manufacture, and it's much easier to do the M4s as part of the production process. So I thought, well, maybe they got a bunch of M3s lying around. But I also thought, well, hey, they don't want to put all the goodies in the mid-level iPad, which will draw away from purchasing the high-level iPads, the Pros. So, they're trying to not just find a price point and a market, they're also trying to keep their product well-defined across the different levels.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense.
I'm taking a look at the comparison between the M2, which was the current model now, to the M3. There really is not much difference between the two. They both have the same cores. One's M3, M2, and you've got the same camera, the same video. I mean, everything else is pretty much the same. Go back.
But you get to purchase a new keyboard too.
They got a new keyboard. Oh boy, exciting! Another overpriced keyboard, $250, whereas the other one's $299. But even comparing it to the one prior to that, the M1 chip, the 10.9-inch size screen, that could be somewhat compelling, but who knows? I mean, processing speeds these days are just so fast between the silicon processors. Even the Wi-Fi, you got Wi-Fi 6 for the M1, and then the other two are 6E. So, I mean, everything else is the same. So how do you compel, this? The Apple Pencil support is as we expect, is the Pencil Pro for this, and this, the USB-C piece of junk, Apple Pencil as well. So, I mean, I know a lot of people are doing comparisons about what is going to be standing out for this. I mean, I don't think anybody is in any one of these three models. I would question whether it's even a worthy upgrade in this case. So Apple may be aiming towards some of the folks that are at the lower processors, like the fifth gen M1. You might be borderline, but if you go down to the 4th gen or even lower, this might be a very compelling reason to upgrade in the Air line. I've always said that the Air has always been the most reasonably priced iPad for what it gives you compared to what the Pro is. I mean, we're all here. We're all Apple pundits. We love Apple, and we're going to have Pro iPads. I've always had one because I have to, because I want to. But the normal person that's out there listening to this, I think that's where they're going to have to decide. I mean, and from what I can, from the examples I gave.
Dave, I'm with you. Every time we get announcements like this, there's this flood. Well, not a flood, but there's a segment of the market of the tech press that comes out and says, "Oh, but it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that." And I want to slap them and say, "Of course it doesn't. It's not supposed to be the top end. It's not supposed to even compete with the top end. It's supposed to fill a niche and a gap and a place in the market." Right. And I feel like each one of these does. I might question a couple things, and I might say, "Gee, if it just had this feature, I could buy that instead of one of the higher priced models." That's sort of the point. That it's going to give you a better experience. I mean, we just went through this with the iPhone 16e. That it doesn't have this lens, it doesn't have this part of the camera, and it's like, yes, of course it doesn't. It's not supposed to. It's in a different market segment. It's not hard to understand.
I'm kind of hoping this is Apple's playing rope-a-dope with us this week and kind of suckering us into the corner with these iPads, and then we'll see some other reveals this week that'll knock us out.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. Yeah. Even if you go back to the iPad Mini, the Mini has got an A17 processor. That Mini does support Apple Intelligence versus the 16, the A16. So Apple, I think, is being smart. They're kind of blending the lines where they know they've got their fans of the Mac Mini, like you, Jeff, and many others. And then you've got the folks who just want a basic iPad, just for their kids. They don't want to spend a lot of money. That's where you got the 11th gen. I guarantee you that there's still going to be a lot of 10th gen ones out there. People are going to be buy them up because they're probably going to be down to like $249, and that's a great price for an iPad. There might be even some lingering 9th gen ones. They're probably even cheaper, $200. So they'll clean those out of the marketplace. But then now they'll start working on this. Now the 11th gen, and Apple will continue to evolve with this. And like I said, I think it's smart the way they did it, because before the Air was kind of close to the Pro in some sense. Before the M series came out, it was very close. So everybody would ask us, is the Air worth it versus the Pro? And it's kind of close, but I mean the Pro kind of led up to a little higher. But now, there's no comparison. I mean, it's the M4 M4 Pro is just not no comparison to what this new Air 3 is. So,
Dave, I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Apple did need to have a more distinct set of features to differentiate the Air from the Pro, and I think now they do. They do have that.
Yeah. Yep. Rich in the chat room says, just got an Air M2, $250 from Xfinity. It's great. Coming from an iPad 8.
Perfect.
So
that's a nice upgrade.
Yeah,
nice upgrade. Very nice upgrade. M2 versus M3. You can't cry about that, Rich. I think you made a good choice.
Yeah. And the other thing, that this just goes to something we say every time we talk about any piece of hardware. It depends on what your use case is. If you're going to be editing video on an iPad with LumaTouch or Final Cut, you're probably going to want to go to the Pro side.
Right.
But if you are just editing things, with iMovie or one of the low end editors, or just doing something that has nothing to do with video, like just consuming media or email or just casual web surfing, one of these low end machines is just fine. Yeah. It just depends on what size shoe you want to wear, and is it going to be a hiking shoe or a running shoe or a dress shoe?
Yeah, exactly.
That wasn't my best analogy, but I did it anyway.
Hey, I took it.
Yeah.
I was excited to see where you were going to go with that.
Shoes and iPads.
That's as far as it went, Jeff. That was the only thing that came to mind. So this is a story that's been going for the last few weeks, and it's going to continue going, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it just because of that. But I do want to give props to Jeff, because he sort of called this one, that if we were going to hear anything else about Apple's position with the UK's demand for a backdoor, it would have to be through a leak. And it appears that that's exactly what happened here based on this Ars Technica article. So, Jeff, Good job.
Go me.
Yeah.
Every now and then, I get it.
So, since you brought this one to the table, what are your thoughts about this appealing to the investigative powers? Is it tribunal or whatever their official entity is?
Okay, so one thing to note from here is that it appears that Apple filed their appeal immediately, which totally makes sense. Now, as far as what's going to happen now with the secret court tribunal, whatever you want to call it, in the UK, the UK has, I think, a very vested interest in not accommodating Apple, even though that it would be a bad decision. Apple is still required to provide that backdoor during the appeal process. Of course, Apple's not going to do that, but they're required to do that. And an interesting thing that we hadn't brought up, but when I was chatting with Patrice Brendamore, she brought it up. So I'm name dropping her so she gets credit for bringing this up. There's a vested interest in the Five Eye countries and just kind of sitting back and letting the UK do this whole thing, because the UK has a history of essentially doing espionage and getting information that can be passed on that would otherwise be a violation of treaties that other countries have. So they can surreptitiously provide information essentially as a data broker to other intelligence agencies and be the go-between that keeps those treaties from being violated. So for the United States, even though we're hearing complaints about, well, we weren't told this was happening, and in behind the scenes, they are probably not going to do much to dissuade the UK from doing this, because it gives the US ultimately access to data that they wouldn't otherwise be able to legally get at. And then add to that down the road, they could also say, well, you've already made the backdoor for the UK, so you're going to have to give it to us too.
Jeff, I'm confused. I thought last week we heard that Amazon was the one that was now running James Bond, not the UK aiming it at Apple.
We live in a mixed up, crazy world, Chuck.
Oh, and Eric's not here, but we got a facepalm out of Jim. Thank you, Jim.
It's just not a show if we don't get a facepalm.
I knew it was my duty.
I just want to point out that Jim just said duty.
Yes.
Hey, Jeff just said duty.
Now let's see if we can get Dave and Chuck to do it. I mean, it's no challenge to get Marty to do it.
Yeah. I duty on demand.
See?
Yeah. It is your duty.
All right, Chuck, you're the only one that's left.
I'm just, there's just one other little twist to this particular story. And this article is actually just a little bit older than the one Jeff just referenced, but Reuters reported that the U.S. was examining whether UK's encryption demand on Apple broke an existing data treaty. And I have not heard any follow-up to this. So maybe I either missed it, but apparently there was some agreement long prior to this between the two countries, and this may have broken that treaty. So take that for what it's worth.
I remember reading a couple pieces about that. So yes, UK and US, we are not supposed to spy on each other's citizens. And I'm just making it super simple. So everyone that's like, well, that's not exactly what it says for this discussion. Close enough. Please don't throw me in a trunk. But yeah, so if the UK were to use this to directly access data from U.S. citizens in the U.S., that would violate that treaty.
Yeah. So if anything has been addressed there, or maybe that's part of Apple's appeal, because we'll never see the appeal, and we'll never know exactly what it says. But that
just
probably
have to wait
is
for the next leak.
Yeah, well, yeah. But it feels like that particular thing, if that's the case, can't hurt the appeal by any means.
I'd be surprised if that wasn't being brought up in the appeal.
Yeah. Since it seems like we're just doing illegal things right now, but this is one, I know we had talked about this when it was first filed, and then it sort of went undercover. But Apple has won an iCloud storage lawsuit that alleged wrongdoing with pricing. This is from 9 to 5 Mac, but it was in a number of places that the lawsuit was dismissed, which I know not everybody agrees with me that Apple can charge what they want for iCloud, and it's just up to you as to whether you want to purchase it or not. But I'm glad to see that somebody had some sense that I just felt like this lawsuit was wrong, and it was one more time that somebody was just trying to get money out of Apple for something that they particularly didn't like. And if Kelly Gamet were here, she'd have my head for those comments.
I would have popcorn right now just to sit back and watch.
Yeah.
Well, frivolous lawsuits.
The judge agreed with Chuck. Let's put it that way.
There you go.
Yeah.
Saying that her ruling, if anything, Apple's allegedly high prices would incentivize rivals to increase production to take the share from Apple, and denied the notion that purchasing iCloud storage is a requirement for users. So,
yeah, the judge is obviously an individual of high quality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that fell flat.
That's
okay,
Chuck. I'll mix it up a little, and I'll agree with you completely. I think this is a frivolous lawsuit, and it did not show that Apple was acting in a monopolistic way and forcing people to buy iCloud. So, yeah, throw this one out on its merits.
Yeah, I get why people feel like they're entitled to it, and I get why people feel like it's a good idea, which is exactly what, if I were Apple, I'd want people to think, so that they would buy it.
Okay, now just to be clear, while I think the lawsuit or the judge ruled appropriately in this lawsuit, come on, Apple, quit being so frickin' stingy with iCloud storage.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.